Many people know this, but heavy metal music exists because of a horrible factory accident. In the 1960s, there was a teenager named Tony Iomi, and for many of you, you'll immediately recognize who that is, but for the rest of you, let's just let it be a surprise. He learned to play guitar and was in a bunch of local bands, playing music very similar to the current popular English rock music of the time, like The Who, the Rolling Stones, the Kinks. But Iomi was also working in a local metal factory to help support his family and pay for music gear and stuff. At a certain point, he decided that he wanted to pursue music full time, so he decided to quit his metalworking job. So it's 1965 and Iomi is 17 years old, and tomorrow is the last day of his job. His 2 weeks notice is almost up, but something in his gut tells him that he shouldn't go tomorrow. And he goes and he tells his mom, I'm not going to work tomorrow. Today was my last day. One thing I actually got wrong here is he actually did go to his last day of work, and then it was on his lunch break in the middle of the day that he went home and decided that he didn't want to go back to work. But his mom says, nope, you can't do that. You got to honor your promise and go work your final day of work. But for some reason, they choose on this day to stick him on a machine that he has no experience with. He's never used it before, and he doesn't even know how it works. So he starts trying to use this machine that involves a hydraulic press coming down and cutting metal. And at one point, he sticks his hand too far into the machine, and the hydraulic press comes down and cuts off the tips of his middle and ring finger. So they collect the severed fingertips in a matchbox and rush Iomi to the hospital. But unfortunately, the doctors tell him that they can't reattach the fingertips, and he's never going to play guitar again. So Iomi is really depressed. But then he learns one thing, and it's that one of his favorite guitar players of all time, Django Reinhardt, also had an injury, which inspires Iomi to overcome the odds and play guitar again. So Iomi creates his own homemade prosthetic fingertips by melting down plastic and forming it to the ends of his fingers, and starts to relearn playing guitar that way. But despite his new inventions, it's extremely difficult to play, and as a result, Iomi has to use lighter gauge guitar strings and tune them down lower so there's less tension on the strings, and play a lot slower than he was used to. So now that Iomi's playing again, he goes out and he reconnects with some old friends and forms a new band that was originally called Earth, but eventually gets retitled as Black Sabbath. And Earth/Black Sabbath wants to be a rock band, but because of the way that Iomi has to play with the lighter gauge strings, the down tuning, the slower playing, the guitar sound of the band is much darker and gritty and aggressive. And because of this, the sound of Black Sabbath is unlike anything that had ever come before it. There are a couple songs that predate Black Sabbath that are somewhat credited with helping to shape the early sound of heavy metal, like Helter Skelter by the Beatles, Dazed and Confused by Led Zeppelin, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida by Iron Butterfly, You Really Got Me by the Kinks. But the first debut album by Black Sabbath is credited as the first heavy metal album that ever existed, and certainly set the tone for the sound and the feel of what heavy metal is in a modern context.